Hello and welcome back to the Boro Breakdown podcast. Big news coming out of the club this morning. Chris Wilder sacked after 11 months in charge. Just 10 points picked up from the opening 11 games so far this season. A Middlesbrough statement was released this morning, which read, Middlesbrough Football Club have terminated the contract of manager Chris Wilder with immediate effect. Leo Perkovic will take over first team affairs in the interim basis, assisted by Craig Liddle, Mark Tinkler and Lee Cattermole. The club would like to place on record its thanks to Chris and his staff for all of their hard work over the past 11 months. I'm really disappointed with this because I thought we were onto a good thing with Chris Wilder. We'll get into it. There is somebody that isn't here today, which is Johnny, the jammy Johnny, we're going to call him, because he's currently living it up in Spain. But he did send us a video to give us his thoughts on Wilder's dismissal.
Trust me, to go away to Spain and then all of this happens, like, there's me enjoying like a nice cloudy day just outside of Torrevieja, and this happens. But Chris Wilder gone, I'm not surprised by it. Not really. I think Wilder was on borrowed time, and I think he was on borrowed time probably from April, really. It felt like there was a lot of trust lost when he was linked with Burnley. There's probably more trust lost when he was linked with Bournemouth, and I felt that's a bit of the nail in the coffin for him, and with the poor performances probably coincided in that. But with Boro, this dates back to a longer time and picture, because when I'm looking at Boro now, I'm thinking, when have we got it right off the pitch? And there's only really one time since McLaren that we have, and that was with Karanka in charge. We had the players, we had the identity, we had the direction we want to go into. And successful teams always have people doing the jobs the best they can, having the duty to really succeed. And for me, we haven't had that probably over the last few years. I think the appointment of Kieran Scott is perfect for us, because we're going in a much better sustainable direction, which is here for the long term, but also giving us the direction and clarity off the pitch, and that will work eventually. We need patience for that. But in terms of Wilder and where we're dating back to, Wilder, I think he's been disloyal and probably had to go for what's happened. But off the pitch, we have to give these managers the right platform, the right opportunity, and the right background to really give them the chance to succeed. Because I feel like every manager we've had has had to complain about how deals are getting done, recruitment's not right, or something's going wrong behind the scenes. And look, frustrations are high in football, egos are quite big, but we have to get that right, and we haven't been able to do that. And it's a shame that we've lost a manager with probably great calibre, really, and a really good CV, and he hasn't been successful at the club. But I wouldn't say the future is not bright still. We can still get a good manager in, and I think Edwards, who's just left at Watford, and I think he could be a really good appointment for us if we were to bring him in. But it comes back to having the identity. Are we getting the right deals in? Are we getting the right players? Are we getting the right characters in the dressing room? Are we getting the right manager? It's very difficult, but also it comes from the top, and everyone's singing from the same hymn sheet. But it's difficult. I think right now we're in a difficult moment right now, but I think fans need to be patient with the next appointment. This is going to be a long-term job, and it has to be a long-term job, because we have a big mess, and we need that to be cleaned up. And it's a shame that things haven't worked out, but I'm very, very excited to see what the future holds. And but first, I'm going to really enjoy my last few days in Spain and not think about the Boro at all, but up the Boro. And I hope we win under Leo Perkovic. I can't believe I'm actually saying that, but up the Boro and up the Boro Breakdown.
See, absolute jammy get leaving us in this absolute chaos. But Johnny there talking about his thoughts on Chris Wilder's departure. Tom, tell me what you're thinking about it.
Still in shock. I mean, first off, I just want to say, nice touch, Johnny, putting the Boro shirt on for that video. You know for a fact below the camera it was just Speedos, but yeah, just still in shock, to be honest. I'd gotten to work this morning before finding out, and I'd seen a couple of articles just kind of like breaking down what had happened over the weekend and why Wednesday is so important for Wilder and stuff like that. And I didn't think that this was going to happen today, because I thought if it's going to happen after Saturday, it would have been yesterday, or like straight after the game, like it was with Warnock. So I didn't think that this was going to be something I'd seen today. I'd gone to the kitchen to make a coffee at work, came back, and my mate sat across from me was like, "Have you seen the news? Wilder's gone." Like, I'm not even joking. I was like, "What? Bloody hell, that's mad." That, and then I was like straight on Twitter and checking what had happened. But yeah, like I was just shocked about it. But I feel like it was coming. Like you said, I thought we were onto a winner with him. As I said on yesterday's podcast, I wasn't completely sold on him when he first came in. I just thought, he'd failed recently at Sheffield United. I wasn't kind of a big fan of playing five at the back, but in fairness, when that first kind of half of his tenure, it's kind of really changed my mind on that. But what was it? Something like 4 wins in 24 games or something like that. Like, something had to change. We were saying it yesterday, and it turns out it's the manager that had to change.
We just looked weird on Saturday, didn't we? And
Yeah.
that team, some people put it forward as a sack me plea. My dad was saying it was a statement to the board saying, "You haven't delivered me the targets that I wanted. This is what you're getting in return." And that was a very bold team selection that had to pay off, and it just didn't. I was listening to Sky Blue Fans TV, their podcast afterwards, and even they were just so confused at what Boro delivered, and it felt like a very significant point that Wilder was making. But I am just really disappointed because I thought we were onto a good thing. I actually thought we'd struck gold with Chris Wilder, a manager that when he took over at Middlesbrough could have probably and should probably have been in a Premier League club. He's of that quality. I know we haven't seen it, so it's probably not the right time for me to be saying that, but when he took over, I think he could have got a Premier League job. So it was a coup, if you will, for Boro to have brought him in. But this decision feels like it has been made not just with results in mind, but with off the field matters, very much in the thinking of Steve Gibson and co. And I made the point yesterday on the podcast. I can't believe we podcasted yesterday and it's already out of date. But I mentioned, and I didn't know whether this was a controversial point, but I said that I just don't think he's the right fit, which is ridiculous because I remember saying and thinking at the time of his appointment, he is perfect for us. It's exactly what we needed. I even said after the Man United game in the Cup, he's the best thing that's happened to Middlesbrough Football Club in years. But I was just thinking over the weekend, maybe he isn't the right fit for us because I think Wilder wanted more than what Boro were willing to give him. And Boro are, I guess, in a way, what was described to me in a meeting last week, completely unrelated to Boro, but I'll fit it into this context anyway, is they're in the journey or on the journey to the start. And Wilder was more of a tomorrow kind of guy, and Boro were a club that were thinking about next year, for example. So Wilder probably wanted that success a little bit more imminently than Boro were planning. So it's just a massive, massive disappointment, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And I think, like I was saying on yesterday's pod, which, as you mentioned, is now out of date.
Should delete it, shouldn't we? There's no point in it now.
I still think, like, Wilder was back to an extent. Like, he's been after Lenihan for years. We've known that. And he's been brought in. Monitors just went off there, so just plunged into darkness. Yeah, so he's been brought in, and you don't bring in the likes of Giles and Stefan if you're planning on staying in this division for another year with the wages that they will be on and that will be, contributing to. So with that being said, I don't understand the whole, while they're kind of like making statements with selections and. In the interview after the game, saying Gyökeres is the best player in the division, he might have a point, but like, there's no need to kind of like point that out because it was very clearly a shot at the recruitment. And one thing I've noticed this season in comparison to last, remember the second half of last season, if we were a goal down and chasing the lead, he'd be bringing every striker on. He'd be going for the Steve McLaren tactic of bringing 4 or 5 strikers on.
Yeah.
launch it into the box and hope someone dive in in the last minutes like macaroni. He's not been doing that this year. It's been very like for like changes. And even though he's had the attacking options on the bench, even if we have been chasing the game, he's just kind of refused to use them in that situation. So I definitely do think there was something not right with recruitment, but I blame Wilder for that more than the recruitment team, to be honest. Because there's no way under our new structure, Wilder was the first appointment under Kieran Scott, for example, and it was well known last summer under Warnock that we were changing direction. There's no way that Wilder comes into this club thinking that he's going to have the final say over all the transfers, and Kieran Scott's just there to kind of like green light them. There's definitely a long-term vision there, so I don't know why he's kind of so opposed. Well, he was so opposed to a lot of these signings, and yeah, it just became clear over the past few weeks that, especially that he wasn't going to use some of these players. The whole development signings thing I thought was a bit of a farce from him. And
hate that. I hate it when managers come out and say that. I feel like it's insulting to the fans, to be honest.
It's insulting to the fans and the players. I'd be really,
yeah.
really annoyed if I was Marcus Forss or Matthew Hoppy, especially, Forss was in a good place at Brentford. He's in the Premier League. He's probably still going to get, some cameo appearances here and there. Might get a loan out to a club that will actually use him in the Championship like Hull did last year. Fair enough, he didn't kind of score a lot when he was there, but probably says a lot more about Hull's quality of team than it does him.
100%.
But both him and Hoppy have played for their national team, so I don't understand how you can kind of say that the development players. And I think the tweet and the Facebook post, probably the Instagram post as well, but I haven't seen that from the club today, were very telling in that they've just kind of came out and said Middlesbrough FC can confirm that we've terminated Chris Wilder's contract with immediate effect. That to me doesn't sound like the standard manager getting sacked, he's leaving with our best wishes or anything. They haven't said it's by mutual consent. They haven't said, he's no longer going to continue in this role, or whatever wording you want to put to it. It's terminated with immediate effect.
Yeah, that's a really strong word as well, isn't it? Because usually you see something a little bit softer than that, but that felt hard.
Yeah,
and particularly pointed.
Yeah, definitely.
Like
So I don't. Yeah, exactly. So I think this goes a lot further than just what we've seen on the pitch this season. I think there's always been rumours this season about some sort of disconnect between him and the board. I'm now wondering if that was the case, because that seemed very cutting.
Yeah, well, Sammy Mockbell from the Daily Mail said that there was differences over opinion regarding recruitment. This was in an article last week when Wilder was linked with Bournemouth. And then Alex Crook from TalkSport earlier on said that the relationship between Wilder and Gibson broke down. Now, Wilder was lucky to stay in the job after the whole Burnley fiasco. I think it's very well known now that that was more than what we thought it was. And I've obviously said I thought it was just nonsense from the bookies. It was more than that. And I think that was the beginning of the end for him, because as soon as there's fractures behind the scenes and tensions, you're never really going to repair that. Karanka, when he walked out against, or just before the Charlton game, he was able to repair that, but only for a certain amount of time, because as soon as the going got tough, it was like, you're off. And Karanka got through it because the results were good. And the core issue of this, at the end of the day, is the results on the football pitch. Because if there's fractures behind the scenes, you could kind of paper over those cracks with good performances and good results. But Boro, we started the season playing all right, or playing good. We probably deserve more than what we got in certain games. But then probably from, I would say, maybe just before the Cardiff game or the Cardiff game, our performances just got worse. And that one on Saturday was particularly telling. And I know we look back on this with hindsight, and I guess we psychoanalyze and reflect, but it was telling. and the players just looked so flat. And I also thought it was interesting that Wilder basically set up shop to be defensive, because that's not what we have become accustomed to under Wilder. That's something that I would have probably said Warnock would do. Pandering to the opposition is what we usually said last season when Warnock was in charge. But to come to a side like Coventry, who have been struggling, and don't get me wrong, I think Coventry are a good side. Matt Robbins is a great manager, and they probably should be higher up in the table than they are. They've, of course, had their issues with their pitch at the CBS, but they're bottom of the table, and their confidence, because of that, they're playing catch up. There's sort of psychology of it. Why are we going to a side that has struggled so far this season to set up to be defensive? And you drop not only Jones, but you drop Giles as well. That was absolutely bizarre to me. And it's so easy to say it now because we know that he's obviously gone. But that was very telling. And I think tells me anyway that he probably knew that he was on borrowed time. But I think what we need now from Boro, and this is what I said on the last podcast, we need communication. We need transparency. They don't need to tell us the dirty secrets. They really don't. They just need to be open with us and tell us what the direction is, because we are in a cycle now. Johnny has said it so many times, and this is what Middlesbrough has become. A lot of football clubs get tarred with reputations. You know, Watford, hire and fire, Spurs, Spursy, bottlers. Boro's reputation and Boro's label is to basically be a club that will try to sell this direction of, right, we're moving forward in a certain way with a certain style, certain manager, certain players. But then things don't fit. It's always square pegs in round holes. And then all of a sudden we're looking back and we've gotten rid of a manager who has complained about recruitment, who's complained about the lack of backing from the board. And then we bring somebody else in and we think, oh, this is fine. It seems like it's the right fit, but it isn't, because Boro don't make it the right fit. And it's just this constant, endless cycle where I think the people at the top of the club do need to be questioned a little bit. And don't get me wrong, Steve Gibson has been fantastic and will continue to be fantastic at this football club in terms of the business side of things, but the footballing decisions, you know, the next manager that we have will be our fourth manager since 2020. That was 2 years ago. I know it feels like about 20 years ago because of COVID, but that was 2 years ago. We've had Woodgate, Warnock, Wilder, and then the next manager to come in before the close of the year. That's just what Middlesbrough have become now. A club that doesn't promote stability, because I feel like, and do you ever feel like this, Tom, that Boro have a direction, but they just don't really know what to do with it or how to really breed it into what they want?
I did when Woodgate got hired, and to be honest, like just a quick point there, I've just realised that we've got more W's in our last 3 managers than we have this season. So
yes, I was thinking that earlier. I'm so glad you mentioned that. Bloody hell! Well, at least we're winning in something.
So I did think it with Woodgate, because there was all the stuff about, you know, the golden threads, and
yeah,
I thought Woodgate had some good ideas. In fairness to him, he wanted to play 4-3-3. He wanted to play attacking football. He wanted that all the way through the club, so that any youth players who were, you know, had that pathway to the first team were already drilled in playing that style. And I still think, you know, that's something that we're doing now with the under 23s. So yeah, I thought that was a good idea. It didn't seem like he ever had the tools he needed to make it work. And don't get me wrong, this isn't me saying that I thought Woodgate was a great manager or anything, because I thought he did okay with Bournemouth, but it's very much in kind of like the Scott Parker thing of like we could have got that team promoted. The quality was there. It was kind of like footy manager. He just needed to put the players into the right positions and motivate them with the team talk. But we didn't give him those tools here. I mean, it was a shocking transfer window for him at first. He had 4 players signed: Marcus Brown, Dijksteel, Bowler, and Mahias. And there was gaps left in the coaching staff as well.
Yeah,
And
that was really important as well for Boro to rectify, and they just didn't.
yeah, there was just no experience there. I know Steve Round was linked at the time to come in. I think from what I heard, he wanted to be director of football, and we
Yeah,
wanted him as
something like that.
assistant manager or something like that. So we ended up with Robbie Keane as assistant manager. So I don't think we like. I think we had the idea then. It's just we couldn't make it work. But I'm not as worried now with Kieran Scott coming in because for me, I do think that there is still a clear direction. And even with getting rid of Wilder, I'm a lot more confident now that the next manager is going to fit the players that we already have, rather than, for example, we tempt Karanka to come back and then we've got to adapt to playing 4-2-3-1 again and stuff like that. I fully believe that we'll be playing 3 or 5 at the back, and using very, very similar style of play and players and stuff. It'll just be, certain players are going to have more chance of getting picked now, like Marcus Forss. So, yeah, I've got more faith in us now that we are heading in the right direction. I think we've got a lot more of the tools there that we need. Kieran Scott's kind of really rebuilt the scouting side of things. We just hired Chris Jones as a scout. I think there was framework put into place in terms of analysis and stuff like that. So I'm fully expecting this to be more kind of like what Brentford did when they were in the Championship. Like, if one of their managers left, they either promoted an assistant or hired someone else who was in the same mold, could work with that model. I think that's what we're going to do now. I'm not worried that, like you say, we've got this reputation of kind of like getting rid of managers after a year now. I'm not worried that we're going to bring in a manager with a completely different style and it's going to take another year to get used to that. I really think it's going to be someone who can come in and work with the existing squad and get better results from it.
I think how I'd describe it is probably all the ideas, but botched execution. I'd probably say, because as you mentioned there with Woodgate, whether he was a good manager or not, I think it's up for debate. A lot of people say he wasn't, but he just didn't have the right tools. You've got Robbie Keane as an assistant. You've got inexperience within inexperience. And with Wilder, I think the more that you think about it, the more it just wasn't going to work. Because as I mentioned, I think he was the type of manager that brings about this expectation of success and promotion in the short to mid-term, and fans are going to start getting restless when that isn't kind of happening or being fulfilled or being on the journey to being fulfilled. And I just think they were on different paths, which is ironic because somebody was in our quote tweets earlier with the clip that we put from, I think it might have been Wilder's first or second press conference, where he was talking about the Sheffield United rumours and the reports that he was apparently not on the same wavelength as the director of football at Bramall Lane, and he fell out with them and things like that. And he said, that's a load of nonsense. And at Middlesbrough, we're all on the same page. Well, clearly, in the end, they weren't on the same page, and that has ultimately led to his dismissal. But we've got a question from Matty on our Telegram chat. If you want to join our Telegram chat, it's very, very simple. It's on the Leveler website. You just need to sign up with your email. It is completely free. Join all of the craziness in there. It's absolutely mad, but it's wonderful. He asks, disregarding the results, what do you think the main factor was in the decision to sack Wilder?
I think, kind of like I said earlier, there was clearly a disconnect between him and the people above him in the club hierarchy. I've given this example on the last couple of podcasts, but it seems very much kind of like the American kind of like general manager, head coach dynamic, where the general manager or director of football in this case was bringing in players that he thinks are going to fit the team and fit the vision, and the head coach is refusing to play them, which I think, it doesn't work as well in English sports as it does in American, because in American there's like a more limited number of players you can have to select from. I think in this case, Wilder was always going to kind of pick the players he wanted to pick, and he had more power to leave the other ones out. So I feel like, and it's all speculation because we don't know, but I feel like it was probably to do with recruitment, just judging by certain players not getting a chance. And I don't think these rumours have really helped either. I think when you've got a manager who's unhappy with recruitment like that, and supposedly there was rumours that he was unhappy with how we were planning for the summer around the time of the Burnley links as well. I think when you've got an unhappy manager like that, he's always probably going to entertain these links. So it's I still feel like it's on him for not kind of being more willing to work as part of that team and bring these players through, because I feel like he clearly has the ability to do it. It's just I don't know, maybe a little bit of ego or something involved in that one.
Definitely. And I mean, there's so many reports that Chris Wilder was flirting with other jobs, interested in other jobs. His party, his side, his agency, whatever, was trying to push, for another move at another club. And you know what, if that's true, and I think it probably is, just given the sheer volume of reports that suggest that he was flirting with other jobs and with other clubs, that is so disappointing to me, because I remember Rob Nichols of Flabbies to the Moon asked me to do a piece at the beginning of the season, and it was just after we went to the Q&A, and he said he was talking about the players, he was talking about him, and then he said the words "all in." So I did my article saying "all in" with Chris Wilder or something like that. And yet it seems as though Chris Wilder just wasn't as all in as we were led to believe. And another funny thing, from his first press conference, he said the words bluffer and spinner, which I've absorbed into my vocabulary since. And in the end, I'm afraid to say that Chris Wilder was a bluffer and a spinner himself, which is somewhat ironic. But you talked about recruitment issues there. They always get the brunt of the blame and the criticism, the recruitment team. A lot of Boro fans really disappointed with the way that they have ultimately not backed Wilder in their eyes this summer. Do you think he wasn't backed?
No.
Tom?
I feel like he just didn't want to use the players that he was provided with. As I said earlier, I don't think you get players like Clark, Lenihan, Giles, Stefan if they're not backing you. You would get League One signings to develop in those positions. We've clearly signed those players with the view that we're not planning on staying in this division for long. Going upwards, not downwards, by the way. So, Wilder had no excuse for that one. But I don't feel like he can say he wasn't backed. Maybe in terms of strikers, and there obviously are a couple of spots still missing in terms of the midfield. But he was given strikers; he just didn't want to use them. And in the midfield, yeah, fair enough. I think we would have all preferred that Tav didn't leave, or if he did have to go, which. Like I said at the time, he's probably been told multiple times, just one more season. So it's fair that he has a shot at the Premier League, but at least get someone else lined up before you let him go. I feel like midfield's probably the only area of recruitment this season where I can be a little bit critical of, just because of how short we were left by not only Tav leaving, but also the decision to loan Piero out. Whether or not he was adapting to this country or not, but we still didn't have anyone else there to back him up. So, like I say, I think he was backed as much as we possibly can. I still fully expect us to sign midfielders in January. I feel like that'll be a priority area. I think it's telling that Luongo's only on a short-term deal until then, because it's either he's going to do a Duncan Watmore and win himself a deal for a little bit further, or he's going to be gone, and then we're going to be looking at adding more quality to that midfield. But he's had decent players provided for him, and in the case of the strikers, it's just he didn't want to use them.
I agree completely. I don't fully buy into the idea that he wasn't backed. And I'll emphasize the word fully there, because I do agree with what you said there about the strikers. That's probably what sticks out like a sore thumb, because none of the strikers that we've got, clearly, they're not Wilder signings. We know that Muniz isn't, because we were linked with him and wanted him when Warnock was here. And even then we thought he's not a Warnock target. He's the target of somebody above him, the recruitment team. Force just hasn't been used. I do not know why he didn't get on the pitch against Coventry, and McNair came on instead as a right-sided defender, for God's sake. And then Matthew Hoppy's played more for our under-21s, which is such a shame, because I thought that he would have more involvement than he has. But I agree with you. I think on paper, we recruited in most positions pretty well. And listen, I don't think it was a great transfer window, but it wasn't disastrous either. We did bring in some great players. Lenihan is a good level championship player. Matt Clark is as well. Alex Moore even. I don't think that we brought in bad players here. We've just, obviously, they've not been performing very well, but that doesn't make them bad players. And then Ryan Giles as well. That is the perfect signing. He would get into any team in the championship that plays wing backs. He is a fantastic addition. But yeah, up front it does stick out. But I don't agree that he wasn't fully backed. But I'd like to hear what other people think. Listeners, if you want to get involved, pop a comment below in the YouTube video or tweet us, Boro_breakdown, Facebook, the Boro Breakdown Podcast, and Instagram, Boro Breakdown as well, without the full stop in between, because that's just a random fan page and that is not us. But reported replacements, Tom. Rob Edwards, the firm favourite, according to the Gazette. Gibson and Kieran Scott will speak to him in the next few days, report the Northern Echo, who also say that Boro are interested in Gary O'Neill. And if that ever happens, I'm going to support Sunderland. I'm out of here. I'm gone. Corberan and Matt Robbins also of interest. Graham Bailey was reporting that. Out of the list of managers that I've mentioned there and others that you've seen, early favourites with the bookies, what are your thoughts on them? Does anyone stand out for you?
Well, Gary O'Neill stands out as someone I absolutely do not want to come back to this club. Ever since that's been kind of like broken today, that interview that he did where he said he got the intentional yellow has been going around as well. And
Yeah,
I feel like that if we made that appointment, that would go down absolutely shockingly. Funnily enough, I feel like Leo and Lee Catamol are exactly who we need in charge for Millwall away on Saturday. So.
Yeah, actually, that's so true.
Absolutely love the thought of that. And in fact, bring Ledbetter up to join them in the first team. It'd be like having free Roy Kents as the manager from Ted Lasso. It'd be absolutely brilliant. Yeah, I think from Rob Edwards, Corberan and Robbins, I'd be happy with any of them. Rob Edwards seems like he would be a good fit in terms of the head coach mould. He came through at Wolves, was it?
Yeah.
Was it under Bruno where he was coaching there?
I was reading
not Bruno, sorry, Nuno. I'm thinking of Bruno Lage, but Nuno.
It might have been. He did mention Graham Taylor in an Athletic piece with Adam Leventhal, and he also mentioned Kenny Jackett, which is one extreme to the other there. But maybe.
I was going to say, I think I saw something today that said he left in 2019 or something to go to Forest Green. And I can't remember if that was around the time Nuno was still there, but
he will
Nuno
have been, yeah.
Played with wing backs, so I don't mind the fact that he's kind of like learned from him. He's clearly had success at Forest Green. Watford, I think no one seriously expected that to last. But I suppose if you're a manager, and Watford come in and offer you a contract, you know that you're getting a massive payoff in about 10 games time anyway. So financially, it makes sense. So true. I feel like Rob Edwards would probably be a good fit. Actually, I saw a rumour on One Borough earlier as well that if he is coming in, we're also looking at bringing in Liam Rossini as a part of the coaching staff, which I also really wouldn't mind at all because I think he's
I'd quite like that.
A great coach. And I feel like a lot of Rooney's success at Derby last season could also be put down to him as well. Corberan and Robbins, I'd prefer Robbins of the two, but I feel like Corberan would probably help us get closer to my pre-season prediction of us becoming a threat from set pieces. And also, I feel like he can switch it up a lot more tactically. But any of those three, I'd be particularly happy with. And like I say, if it is Rob Edwards, and that rumor is true about Rossini coming in, I quite like that angle where we're bringing in a young head coach, we're bringing in a young, highly rated coach for the coaching staff. Rob Edwards will obviously have his own staff as well. I think it'll just work pretty well, and I think that dynamic that I was talking about earlier, almost like the whole general manager head coach system, I think that would work a lot better with Rob Edwards in charge than it has done for Wilder, who is probably more of a typical manager, and he was manager rather than head coach. So I think a head coach model would work better in this scenario.
If it's Corberan, I hope he doesn't bring that assistant with him, because I can't deal with Boro having somebody on the coaching staff with better eyebrows than me. But Leo, a point on Leo and Catamol, such an interesting. Well, it's a quartet, isn't it? With Mark Tinkler and Craig Liddell, who of course was on the podcast with Dicko and Johnny. A very interesting mix of managers there. Or interim managers. Sorry, you might as well have just plucked Leadbitter from there. I don't think we have enough interim managers, to be honest. But if the players can't get up for Leo on Wednesday, I'd have to question their commitment to Boro, because what a man to have leading that
By
game.
the way, what a story it would be if we go undefeated under Leo, and then it's just like, all right, give it Leo till the end of the season, and he gets us up, because that would be absolutely quality. You know what? If he gets us promoted, bring Itor back as his assistant, just so that comes full circle as well.
You've asked a really good question, actually. Whether Leo will wear a suit or a tracksuit.
Leo wearing a suit would just seem very, very strange. But
I want to see it. I think we should get our predictions in. I still think he'll just go into tracksuit, but it'll be interesting. What about Catamol, though?
I think Catamol will be, tracksuit top and still wearing the Boro shorts. But
Ryan Robson.
Leo in a grey suit, and then Catamol like that, and Tinkler and Little both in tracksuits as well. I feel like Catamol will register himself as a player and be ready to come on in midfield.
Oh, chaotic. I love it. But the early favourite is Rob Edwards. I've just done a bit of digging on him. I've got a lot of points, so bear with me. I won't be surprised if I have a horse throw and turn into Deirdre Barlow with all of the notes I've got on the screen here. But I had a look. His most used formation is a 3-4-1-2. So Riley McGree stepped back up in that number 10 position. I spoke to Luke, who's our resident Boro fan in the Telegram chat, who actually supports Watford. He said that Rob Edwards' style of play is sustained pressure in the final third over the defensive build-up that we usually see under Chris Wilder. The team will push quite high up to press. The midfield will be less important in possession. He used the word bypassed. At Forest Green Rovers, he had a deep link striker, which was Jamil Matt, and a poacher in Matty Stevens. The Matt partnership, as it was called. And when I think about the striker options that Boro have, it's, for me, Muniz is that deep link striker, the target man, if you will. And then the poacher, you've got Akpom or Foss. I would like to see either of those combinations. But the wing backs are crucial in that system. They are the main source of creativity. Kane Wilson got 6 goals and 13 assists. And then Nicky Cadden got 3 goals and 14 assists in their promotion winning season last campaign. Of course, both of those players are no longer at Forest Green Rovers. Wilson's at Bristol City and Cadden's at Barnsley, I believe, but 2 very, very good players. I think Kane Wilson actually got the League 2 player of the season for that season. But it is a cross-heavy style, a league high 494 crosses last season. Rob Edwards said in a piece with Adam Leventhal that I mentioned earlier in The Athletic that the basic premise was ball out wide and crosses into the box. So Ryan Giles, it's perfect. I think, to be fair, Ryan Giles is perfect for any manager that plays with a wing-back system, unless that manager is a Scrooge and wants to play with a back 5, like Tony Pulis playing Dale Fry as a right back for some reason. But I think that's perfect, because Boro have lurched from one approach to another far too often, and it's not sustainable. It's not healthy because we usually see the rebuild 5.0, rebuild 6.0, rebuild 7.0, and it's this constant overhaul of players and styles and approaches and signings that just doesn't culminate into a good mentality and a good atmosphere at the club and essentially a good philosophy. But pressing is also pretty important as well. Now, Forest Green Rovers were top for pressures per defensive action, which is the number of opposition passes allowed per defensive action in their own third last season. And you can see 10.2 PPDA. So that means that they weren't allowing the opposition to have too many passes before they pressed them. And Rob Edwards said that there were two non-negotiables for them, which was 5-second regains and constant pressure. Now, this would worry me a little bit. I mean, Rob Edwards did say that in the Championship, this was ahead of his season opener with Watford, because Adam Leventhal does cover Watford. But he said that in the Championship, you have to adapt because obviously it's 2 leagues above. But I just don't think we have the players to press so much. I don't think, well, certainly based on what we've seen this season. But then I think back to last season and we did exactly that. So maybe we do have the players to press. Alex Mort was a pressing midfielder at Barnsley as well. So yeah, maybe we do.
I was thinking about this after yesterday's pod because I feel like I was a little bit harsh on Matt Crooks after the Coventry game, but he pressed really well at the first kind of half of Wilder's stint.
Yeah, he did.
I remember he was the one pretty much leading it out of the midfield and helping the right-sided striker while Jones was pressing up as well on the right-hand side. And we've not seen that from him this season. And like I've said a few times, it seems like we've been playing in slow motion quite a lot. So I don't know if it is kind of like a confidence issue or there has been, some sort of, Wilder's lost the dressing room or anything like that to kind of cause that. But, when I was talking yesterday about like players don't suddenly become bad overnight, like, Matt Clark, Linehan, Stefan, I gave as examples. I think it's the same for Crooks. He was, one of Rotherham's best players. He was one of our better players last season. I thought, he didn't get into double digits with his goals or something. And
yeah, the first time a midfielder's done that since Ledbetter in 2014-15.
Double digits in goals and yellow cards, so it was absolutely fantastic. And
the perfect midfielder.
He seemed to really adapt to that formation well. So for me, something's changed this season, and I think we do have that capability to press. It's just for whatever reason it hasn't been happening this season. So if we were to hire someone like Rob Edwards, I would fully expect that someone like Crooks and as you mentioned there, Moore could do that role. Like I say, it doesn't, just because they're playing poorly at the moment doesn't mean that they're suddenly awful players. They need to be shipped out and replaced with someone else. With good coaching, those performances can come back.
Absolutely. So just a quick recap on Rob Edwards then. 3-4-1-2 / 3-5-2. So not too dissimilar to what we have played so far this season. A high pressing team. He wants to get the ball back as soon as possible in high areas of the pitch. The midfield, a little bit bypassed as what Luke said, but wing backs really, really important. A high crossing team. Well, just to reflect again on Wilder's time at the club, there were highs, and I do think that he probably delivered more highs than the last 5 managers that came before him combined. But what were a few highs for you, notable games or moments under Chris Wilder?
Well, I think the cup run has to be up there. I think that would be everyone's first thought. That night at Old Trafford and that whole weekend for me, as I mentioned, it was my birthday that weekend and went out in Redcar the night after and sounded like Sean Dyche on the Sunday. So,
That's what happens when you go at the deck, Tom.
Oh, you know what? Fantastic place. I'd absolutely go there again. It was a great night.
Says no one about Redcar.
I will avoid the Jaeger bombs from there because that was vile. But I'd still, give credit to Wilder and the team for an absolutely great weekend in my life for that one. The Spurs game, absolutely fantastic performance, and then there's a couple of league games as well. Derby, it was a very satisfying result to shut them up after after Gibson had finally agreed the resolution out of court with Mel Morris the night before, and then I was selling fanzines that day. And the amount of Derby fans who seem to have the impression that Mel Morris had somehow got one over on Steve Gibson and stuff like that. I really hope he was lose today and lose heavily, and they did. So that was a great game, and I would also say Blackpool away, because I wasn't there, but that looked fantastic. I mean, everyone I know came back with COVID, sadly. Yes. They all recovered, a couple of weeks later. But I still felt jealous of them all for being there, because what an end to the game that was.
Yeah, Blackpool, I think for anybody that was there, especially, has to be up there with a high. I would say Man United and Spurs. I know it's really easy to say the cup games, but just so good. The Tottenham game especially, because when Coburn scored, the Riverside just absolutely erupted. And then after that game, the players led the clap in for All Wilder said. That won't be sung anymore, but if it's Rob Edwards, there's 2 syllables in his name, so it could easily be replaced. But some really good highs, which is just such a shame, because it feels like this just wasn't meant to happen. That I genuinely thought it was just uphill from last season, and that we just keep building. And it is so typical of Boro that we just can't have anything nice for very long, can we? Because it's just it's never meant to be, and it's such a massive shame. But yeah, I think the highs, last minute winners. You know what? Actually, I'm going to change mine. I'm going to say the Nottingham Forest game on Boxing Day, because I was in Leicester, and I travelled down because my sister lives in Leicester. And I travelled down. I went straight to the game, and I watched the best football match that I've seen in about 7 years, I think, since that Brighton game at the Amex, where we absolutely demolished them and ended their unbeaten run under Aitor Karanka. It was just so good. The pressing, we mentioned it in the last podcast, the pressing was absolutely fantastic. We were so good in our combination play. We looked like we knew we were the shit, and yet we turned to shit this season, which is just, again, I'll reiterate it, such a massive shame that the balloon has deflated the way that it has. But just to finish off, we usually start the podcast with a 3-word review, but I want to end it on a 3-word review instead. Tom, what are your 3 words to describe Chris Wilder's tenure at Middlesbrough?
Well, the ones that came to mind were sometimes good, sometimes shit, and then I realised that was 4 words. So, I'll just go with the disappointing end. I don't think anyone thought that it was going to end this way when he came into the club last season. I thought we all thought at the time we were onto something good, and there was a large part of that season where it looked like we might go through the playoffs, or even automatically, because we looked that good, and then the wheels fell off towards the end of the season, and just never recovered. And it's clear now that there was stuff going on behind the scenes as well, which we might not ever get to find out about unless Wilder does a Warnock and goes on TalkSport tomorrow and reveals everything, and then the club can fire back. But yeah, just very disappointing for it to end this way, but hopeful for the future now that we can bring in someone who's going to work with these players and get our season back on track and hopefully get us back where we belong.
Good 3 words. I think mine is another false dawn, which is somewhat ironic because it came up on my memories this morning that we actually recorded a year ago today exactly. The podcast name was Another False Dawn, and I was hosting that one as well. So very weird. But yeah, I think as well, I know I've said 3 words there. I'm going to say another one. Just a massive shame because I just thought that, as I said at the beginning, that we were on to a really good thing, and that that was it. I thought, okay, Boro have got the right man in, and we're going up. not necessarily promotion, but we're going on an upward trajectory, and unfortunately it just wasn't to be. But that's it. Thanks for joining me again, Tom. It was a wild ride, but it's no more. Wilder out, Edwards in. That was the Boro Breakdown podcast, and this was all your matchday chatter in a pod.